Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Peter Finch.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
This is the podcast for people who love television and want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes in show business.
Okay, so this is a slightly different sort of episode this week. It's a bit of an experiment. We've got a guest with us this week. And I'm delighted to say it's our old friend Andy Harries. He's here, and he was founder, as you all probably know, chief executive of Left Bank Pictures, where he's still the executive chair, and he's been both head of drama and head of comedy at Granada. He is, by any metric you care to measure, one of Britain's most storied and successful producers.
He's the man behind, to name just a few of his extraordinary back catalogue of shows, The Royle Family, Cold Feet, The Deal, The Queen, The Crown, and more recently, Department Q. If I read out an exhaustive list of all his hits, we'd have no time to hear from him. So, Andy, thank you for coming along. Thank you for observing the dress code.
Yes.
We've all,
can I say,
prior arrangement, come in striped blue shirts
We
today.
look like we're the kind of members of the Surrey Crown Bowls team.
Well, I was going to say the Beach Boys on a reunion tour. Yeah. The only living members of the Beach Boys wearing stripy shirts.
Jesus Christ.
Doing Surfing USA.
Well, it's delightful to be here. Thank you for asking.
So what are you up to at the moment?
So we are, well, I'm still at Left Bank. I mean, I had decided about 18 months ago that, that I thought that running the company for 20 years was, as a CEO, was long enough in a sense. And not that I absolutely don't want to retire, but I did think that maybe it would be good to get someone else in to take it on. So finally we lighted in this process with Sony, who now own the company, on Charlotte Moore, which was an incredible...
and has Charlotte begun yet? Has she?
Charlotte has literally just started this week,
actually.
Yesterday
is why you're able to be here doing this podcast
exactly.
with us. Or you'd be changing your desk otherwise, as you always were.
Exactly.
And she's the former chief content officer of the BBC.
She's the former chief content officer.
So it's a big booking?
BBC. She's a really big booking. And I think for her, I mean, obviously it's best to speak to her, but I think for her it's a really radical change. You know, she spent 15, 16 years at the BBC, latterly running the biggest train set, well, one of the biggest train sets in the world, I imagine.
But as a buyer?
As a buyer, over everything. And
you are a seller.
I am always been a seller. I've never been a buyer.
You're a brilliant salesman.
Well, so as are you, Jimmy, as are Peter, actually. I think there's one thing in common. We all know how to sell stuff.
I've got some watches, actually. I'm going to introduce you to.
Some brushes.
I know. People have always said to me I'd have been fine flogging the apples at Covent Garden in its heyday, and I probably would have been.
Can I ask you about that? Is that I've come up against sometimes... previous regimes of the BBC, I'm talking about the 90s, where I'm walking into a controller and his assistant says, oh, by the way, he doesn't like being pitched to. And it's a rather kind of snooty approach to selling programs where they didn't like the idea that you go in and try and sell hard. You kind of have a discussion about the cricket and then kind of creep up on them. Do you find that the people in this business, there's a difference between Britain and America in terms of selling?
Yes, that's a very, very interesting point, actually, Jimmy, and I think that's absolutely right. For a very long time, they didn't like a sort of crass, I didn't mean crass, but a commercial approach, i.e. a positive sales process. I've always had, and this is my advice to anyone who ever comes to see me, and I've repeated it a few times, I always say, when you are selling, if you can't make a sale, at least make an impression. So I leave the room knowing that the commissioner is going to remember you, if not the project. And I think that's really important, but a lot of people, it was fun. People don't always love that.
I always used to say selling and pitching is about listening as well as talking. So the extreme of the in-your-face pitch, which is basically to sort of pin somebody to the wall and say, I've got the best script ever written, you must sell it, often does backfire because you're not actually in a dialogue with the person and listening to what they've got to say as well.
I can't remember what it was I was selling, to be honest with you, but I was trying to sell something to the BBC, and they quite liked the idea, but they didn't like whoever it was I was... one of my presenter suggestions. And then I could see that I was starting to backtrack in the middle of the meeting as it all started to get slightly pear-shaped. And I suddenly thought, oh, yes, what were they called? The two old ladies who used to...
the two cooks.
The two cooks, that's right.
Two fat ladies?
The two fat ladies.
Two fat ladies.
You wouldn't use that
No,
title,
well, you wouldn't say
No.
that, but because I suddenly thought the two fat ladies, that'd be brilliant. I said, listen, I think actually you're absolutely right. Listening to what you're saying, I see how you'd like it to do. I think, we should use the two fat ladies. And there was a lot of pause. Went, you know that one of them died 6 months ago, Andy.
Well, the one fat lady...
I've got
I
That's
think
what I said. I said, well, I mean,
The wonder of
she needs a job.
technology. We can solve that one. Don't worry about that.
what fat lady? She's got fatter. So actually,
She fills the screen.
The two fat ladies.
Yeah.
Oh, man. there's
I know
many-
you've got to improvise in the room where you're selling it.
I tell you what, the worst pitch I ever had was I was trying to sell a talking dog show,
I
which
think
Peter
I
will
know.
remember this.
Oh, I love this show.
I love this show. I did a 10-minute pilot, courtesy of BBC. I had one enthusiast at the BBC who was briefly head of comedy, then moved north, leaving me with this 10-minute pilot, which I thought was fantastic work of genius. And I just thought automatically it was going to go to a series.
What was it?
What was it? The talking dog?
It's the bad detective whose dog is cleverer and solves the crime.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
the
that.
elevator pitch.
It was a detective show and a talking dog show at the same time, but only it was like Mr. Ed.
I think we should
only
explain to our listeners the rights in this are still available.
the talking dog. The detective was the only person who could talk to the dog.
You can't go wrong with that.
It's a brilliant idea. And as part of the pitch, I went. As part of, I mean, obviously I did this little taste tape. I couldn't get Shane, who was then running BBC.
Shane Allen.
Shane
Allen,
Allen,
yeah.
exactly. Well, I liked actually Shane Allen, but this was not a pitch he liked very much. And I decided to try and be inventive with it. And I bought a talking dog that you could get at Hamleys, that you pulled its tongue out and then you recorded something, and then then it would pitch it.
Yes.
You took that to the pitch.
I took that to the pitch, and Shane was sitting behind his desk, and I said, I put the talking dog in front of him, and I said, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let the dog do the talking.
Yeah.
Shane later
What did it
described
say?
Well, it said, this is a fantastic show, you've got to
Oh,
buy
I
it.
see.
But
You literally rigged it to
Of
say,
course.
"Oh God."
Shane then later at the
Put a lot of
television
effort
festival
into it.
that year described it as the worst pitch, the most embarrassing pitch he'd ever had. Danny Cohen turned the idea down.
Oh, did he?
He thought I was going to. We nearly went to fisticuffs. Actually, I thought he thought I was going to whack him one, but I mean I wasn't. But I was very angry. I must.
Which I always think works when somebody turns down an idea. Just punch them in the face. Then they'll remember the pitch.
Yeah,
They'll
well,
remember-
exactly.
You leave an impression.
I did
Literally
definitely-
leave an
you
impression.
definitely leave
I
an impression.
remember not long after I became controller of BBC One, my predecessor, Lorraine Hegarty, came in because she'd taken over my old job running Talkback, and she had a wedding-based fact-ent format. I can't remember anything about it at all except it involved weddings. So she decided to come along with two colleagues. One of whom was an old friend of mine called Richard Holloway. I can't remember who the female colleague.
Producer.
The producer, yeah.
Legend.
And she obliged them to come along dressed as the bride and groom in a wedding. And interestingly, she didn't bother. She didn't dress as she came along in her ordinary clothes. There's Richard Holloway sitting there in sort of white tie and tails, and this poor woman dressed in a fucking wedding dress.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
And I sat there and thought, one, this makes no difference whatsoever to whether it's a good idea or not. No. But two, Lorraine, this must have been your idea. If this was your idea, why aren't you dressed for a wedding? She got her colleagues to do it.
And
Did you buy the show?
No, I didn't buy the show.
He didn't buy my talking dog show either. You know.
Oh,
I kept saying.
What did he turn it down?
He turned it down. And
I
also, if I might say so, Peter will disagree. It was a bit. He needed it. He needed a bit.
Yes.
ITV needed freshening up at the
ITV
time.
still needs a talking
this
dog
was
show
the
to
solution.
this day.
I knew it would be groundbreaking.
Have you pitched it to Kevin Liker since?
I pitched it to everybody.
Are you saying to Charlotte Moore, you now need to go out and pitch this show, Charlotte? Come
Oh,
on.
I want to be a fly on the
can-
wall when
you
she
can
pitches
get
the
it
talk-
on the li-
Make
get it over
Charlotte
the
pitch
line.
the talking dog show. It'll be good for her.
That's a very good idea.
It'll be a good practice for the pitch.
Let's just maybe broaden a bit, Andy, to the state of the industry today. A lot of people think these are really, really tough times in the industry. Just give us your take on how it's changed, where it's going, and how, if you were running an independent company today, you should think about the industry.
So I think there's just less demand for as many programs as there used to be, say 5 years ago. That's one thing. So there's definitely been a drop in
Just sheer quantities
sheer
of commissions.
quantity, and at the same time a massive drop in the margins, basically the profits that are available for independent, whether you're an actual independent or whether you're a half-owned or wholly owned independent company. It's all much the same. It's just very, very difficult to make money, I think. So, and that's one of the reasons why I felt that it was right to hand over Left Bank, in a sense, to a new CEO to kind of look at the next 5 or 10 years, because I think it's going to be very challenging. I think it's going to be challenging not to sell shows. We've got 2 or 3, probably 3, maybe even 4 returning series. So as a company,
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
We're in
But
good shape.
Are you in a better position owned by Sony? I mean, I realise that's a difficult question to ask you because you can hardly say no. But let's just sketch this in for those who aren't aware of this or aware of the history. We've all run fully independent companies, and we've all at various times been involved in selling them in one way or other. I sold Talkback to a company that then became Fremantle.
Investment bank.
Jimmy, you've sold to an investment bank. I know they're still your best friends, and you still send them Christmas cards.
Yeah.
And you sold Left Bank to Sony. So you're now a Sony, or not you, Left Bank is a Sony-owned company, whereas Expectation, my company, we have a minority stake to the BBC, but we're ultimately an independent company, and so's Hattrick.
I'm going to be completely honest here. So, obviously I was an ITV executive 25 years ago, so I know what it's like to work, and I grew up in ITV, so I'm completely relaxed as a corporate person and understand the rules and the games. I mean, I like to push against them, of course, that's half the fun. But when I set up a company, as you both did too, I mean, the sense of being able to do it for yourself, to be kind of propelled by your own enterprise and initiative and rewarded, and I don't mean the money, I mean just the reward of succeeding, was really brilliant and intoxicating and so absorbing that for the last 15 or so years, while I still ran it and still owned most of it, it was brilliant. A couple of years ago when Sony finally took it over, things started to change, and not in a bad way. I'm perfectly happy working for Sony, but I suddenly sort of woke up and thought, hello, I've sort of gone back to what I was 20 years ago. I'm just another... I'm a very
There's
privileged
a
person.
Sony org chart, and you're somewhere on.
I'm a studio executive.
We met nearly 40 years ago in a ski resort.
Yes.
And you were doing a documentary with Lenny Henry.
I was.
Next thing I know, you're working for Granada, and you're head of comedy.
Yes, very bizarre, wasn't it? They made me head of comedy.
Yeah, and then you did, of course, I was always fascinated by that. I tell the Cold Feet story sometimes about how, well, you tell about Cold Feet became one of the most iconic shows on ITV, but it was actually killed off at birth, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. Yes, it was, absolutely. Cold Feet was came from a spec script, not Cold Feet itself, but this writer wrote a spec script, which I also made. I sold it to ITV. This was a guy called Mike Bullen. He wrote a spec script about two people who fell in love and got married at Wembley. And I thought it was just a nice idea. It was very nicely written. I brought him in, and I liked him a lot, and he seemed very smart to me. He had been at Cambridge and all sorts of things, but he was just fundamentally a smart writer who seemed well tuned into his generation. And so we made that. It wasn't Catherine Zeta-Jones and Steve Coogan.
Wow.
No. ITV Centre turned down the casting. They didn't think either were. They thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was a has-been because she'd been in
Darling Buds of May.
Darling Buds of May 5 years before, and no one had ever heard of Steve Coogan. So instead of making an iconic television film, which would still be screened today and with much admiration, I ended up with a very different cast. Anyway,
okay.
But the relationship with Bullen developed, and then I was also working with Christine Langan, who later became head of BBC Films as a tremendous producer. And we were I know it's very odd, but because we were I was in my mid-30s, I suppose at this point, mid-late 30s, there was nothing on British television that reflected our age, our aspirations.
The 30-somethings.
Exactly. There was the American show, the 30-something had just started.
Which was huge.
Yeah, huge. And there was absolutely nothing on. There's nothing on in the UK, never mind being made. Was nothing at all. So we sort of thought, well, that's just clearly something.
Would it be fair to say you kind of felt that ITV was aimed at your parents?
Oh yeah, it was very old-fashioned.
Yeah.
We look at Friends, look at 30-something. Why can't we do something like this for the UK? And we started to workshop it together. And Mike got very inspired and actually wrote. I think everyone knows this. I mean, he drew from all his friendship groups and created the characters. He created great characters, and bit by bit we got a great pilot. And it was interesting at that time. I had I suppose I had the power, as the head of comedy, to actually commission pilots, which is, how Mrs.
And it went out as a one-off, didn't it?
It went out as a one-off on ITV, and I can't remember, something happened that night. I think it got pushed back a little bit. Anyway, it obviously didn't make much impression. It wasn't really watched. It wasn't really promoted. It was just a one-off, and it was dead and buried and gone. And it was really good. It was obviously the cast was, as the original cast was the same to the end. And what rescued it was the Golden Rose of Montreux.
Yes.
And I think it was David Lindemann who pushed it into the Golden Rose, and I think it also pushed it along the road a little bit. I don't know,
But it won the Golden Rose.
It won the Golden Rose.
But it's so strange
it won the big
because-
prize.
Yes,
Because
and that time it mattered. It did
it
matter.
didn't
though.
mattered,
matter.
in the industry. It didn't matter to ITV viewers. In
No,
other words,
no,
the
no,
ITV
I know,
viewers
but I just jumped
aren't
up
going
and
to be
down.
sort of manning the barricades saying,
No, but there was
this
enough
program's
reason to
won
go
the
back
Golden
into
Rose.
the ITV centre and say, come on,
Yeah.
guys, this is embarrassing. You once won the award for this show.
Yeah.
It's a great show. It's also, by the way, not terribly
But let me
expensive.
ask you a question about this, because this is a sign of the changing times. Had ITV stuck with their decision and said, we don't care about the Golden Rose of Montreux, it's dead and buried, am I right in thinking it would have been dead and buried? Whereas
Well-
in the modern world, you could have taken it off to a streamer, you could have taken
Well,
it
you
off
could in
to
the modern
be-
world, but I was the first person to sell an ITV show to the BBC.
Okay,
So that
was
this-
a very unusual thing
oh
to
my
do.
God! And the only way I got the Mrs. Merton show, I don't know whether this is interesting or not, but I met Caroline Aherne. She was obviously in Manchester at the very time I became head of comedy, and she was part of a wonderful group of people
Yeah,
that
she's
included
brilliant.
Steve Coogan and John
Yeah,
Thompson,
John Thompson.
and Oasis, of course, and all that kind of stuff.
Right place, right time.
Right place, right time. And I loved Manchester, actually. And anyway, so we made this pilot with Caroline, and I was rung up by whoever it was doing the Edinburgh Television Festival that year, saying,
Yeah.
would I come to would I sit on the panel to do a comedy show?
Right.
To discuss comedy. And I said, look, there's nothing fucking worse in the world than
I'd
sitting
rather
around
kill
discussing
myself.
comedy. You've got to have a laugh. So I thought about it, and I went back to him, I said, look, I'll only come if you will let me play 3 clips from 3 pilots that I've just made and let the audience vote on which of them should be made.
Good idea.
And so it was a clip of Mrs. Merton, it was a clip of a Lee Evans pilot, and a sketch show with Steve Coogan and John Thompson and Caroline, which was equally good, which I sadly didn't get made. Anyway, at the end of the day, I did this did this number on at Edinburgh, and in the audience was Alan Yentop and Michael Jackson, and they
Who were controllers of BBC
they were
One and
controllers
Two.
of BBC One and Two.
Yeah.
And Michael came straight up to me afterwards and said, "We'll have the Mrs. Merton show." I said, "Good
Bought
man."
it in the room.
Yeah, bought it in the room, and that
And
was
there were
that-
no
that was it.
rights issues
That was the
stopping
first.
you doing that.
No, ITV were.
Because ITV...
Well, Granada was thrilled,
it's a
and
sketch
ITV
in
went,
the- it's a
"Ask."
sketch in the history, because this is ITV. When I joined ITV in 2008, which is later
Yeah.
than this, it was just one company
Yes.
called ITV.
Yeah.
And so ITV could think with one head. But this is the federal ITV.
But talk about
where
that.
the
I mean, that's
talk about that.
That's
and
an
the
interesting world to be
strange
in,
way
isn't
it
it?
worked.
Well, I saw all that from the point I was when my last phase at ITV, 92 through to 2007, saw the final. So in the mid to late 90s, there was this thing called the ITV Centre, which was because with all the federal companies, Carlton and Granada and Southern and
Ulster.
Yorkshire and Ulster
Yeah,
and
and about-
Grampian.
about 7 companies,
yeah,
weren't
yeah,
there?
mad. And then
All
bit by
feeding
bit-
into the network.
That's how it worked. And then basically Carlton and Granada and London Weekend, of course, were the 3 big ones. So we were scrapping basically for the
So
budget.
quite political then.
It was very political, very, very
Like
political.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was a bit like Game of Thrones. I was always having tussles up. I wrestled the head of comedy down to the floor one particular.
See, that's the way to sort things out.
I don't know why I'm not embarrassed about this. Actually, I was actually taken out of the ITV Centre by Andrea Wanfa. I was marched
Can we
out.
name names here? Who was the head of comedy who...
Paul, his second
Paul
name.
Spencer.
Paul Spencer. Yeah.
He was a very nice man, Paul Spencer.
He
but
was a nice man,
And
wasn't he?
a
But
ve-
he's
and a
sort
very
of-
good wrestler.
the sort of- he's the sort of man you might meet in the local golf club. I mean, he didn't,
if he listens to
didn't
this,
face-
he
didn't
might
want-
he'll smile. I think we had a huge fight. We literally did wrestling on the floor. And Andrea
those are the
Wanfa-
days.
Someone spotted us wrestling, fighting, and Andrea Wanfa suddenly burst through the door and said, Andy, get up! You've got to drag me away. I said,
Yeah.
no, he's got to fucking commission this show or not. Anyway, I was marched out. Yeah.
I think
But I would
threatening
say- I would
commissioners
say
with
it's interesting.
physical violence is
why not?
perfectly all right.
You started Left Bank in 2007. By
Yes.
then, we'd been independent producers for a long time. So I can remember...
You were both inspiration. I can
well,
say
very kind of you to say
this. You
so,
were
but I
very,
can remember-
very much, you know,
I can
I'd
remember
watched...
having conversations with you saying, I don't know whether to leave to Granada, should I
no,
start it?
absolutely.
And I would say, but as people who came up as independent producers, there were a lot of people who were at that time thinking of leaving the BBC, thinking of leaving Granada or, the other ITV companies. And we, as independent producers, could have picked out the ones we thought would thrive and the ones we thought wouldn't. And you'd have been in the ones that we thought would thrive because you're the wrestling the head of comedy to the ground aspect is an important part of it. In other words, you need to be very tenacious.
I think good organisations, and the BBC, I think, was more like this in the past. They would encourage mavericks.
Yeah.
So you were a maverick working inside a corporation.
Exactly.
Then you step outside the corporation, and then you've actually become a fully fledged entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I, like Peter, I meet people sometimes who say, I'm thinking of setting up a production company, and we chat for a while. And on the odd occasion, I've advised them to stay where they are.
Yeah.
On the grounds that I just think they'd be miserable out here, which is a bit more kind of ruthless than sitting inside a big corporation.
Yes. I mean, I agree. And I suppose that's what I was trying to say to you. Is, having done, go back to the present, having done left back for sort of nearly 20 years, I want a bit more space now to think about what else I'm doing. So I'm still part of left bank, and I'm still going to make shows, but I want a bit of freedom to do some other ideas.
I think that you
to
want to
sort
do.
of turn it on its head, because I sometimes wonder about this. Are you in the better place owned by Sony? In other words, you and I, Jimmy, have ridden the wave of independent, the independent boom that started with Mrs. Thatcher creating the 25% quota. I know I took a decade off to go on, but I'm back in it. And so we've been part of that almost from that day. So the question I'm asking is that actually going to come to an end? In other words, will it come to a time when to be a properly independent company, you haven't got deep enough pockets, you haven't got the backing of a Sony or an All3Media, a Fremantle or whatever, that it becomes harder and harder? Would you advise a person, maybe at the age we were when we started independent companies, to do it today?
I think that in a sense, what with the last 25 years, I think that era is largely sort of finished or finishing.
Yes. Yeah.
And actually, it's not of great interest anymore. I mean, there are two things going on. I think for a certain amount of executives who are quite bright and smart, they tend to get hired by American companies and put into a UK office at a large salary, a very large salary.
Are you talking about Wayne Garvey?
And
just for the record, if you're not watching this on YouTube, Andy kept a straight face while responding to that.
But there are companies like A24 and Brad Pitt's just set up all these sort of American companies.
And A24 poached Piers Wenger from the BBC, head of drama, to go and work for them.
Brad Pitt has just poached Ed McDonald from Clerkenwell.
Right.
And these are all excellent people. But I
there are Americans who want footholds in the UK and Europe.
Yes. Exactly. So they're picking up very good executives who tend to be obviously in other companies, and then they're paying them. I don't know exactly how much they're being paid, obviously, but I understand that the salaries are pretty big, and that's you think, oh well, why would you set up on your own? You might as well just take the shelling from. But I think that the generation now, truth be told, is that when you can make your own content so easily just on your phone, you can make movies on your phone.
Yeah, but you can't make The Crown. You can't make something full fat high budget, things like that.
But I think The Crown, in the end of the day, was one of those, as we've chatted many times before, bit of a one-off moment in terms of a window of opportunity, a brand new streamer with very deep pockets and very ambitious at the time.
It's a big statement, wasn't it?
There was nothing to lose.
I'm sure you've told this story before, but talk about the pitch for that, because I remember you did pitch it to me at ITV, and I remember thinking. I remember saying to you as you left the room, "What happens next, Andy?" And you said, "Well, we're just going to America to talk to some people there." And I thought, "Well, that's the end of that. Then we're not going to get it."
But that's not. That's actually.
But no, that's fine. I totally understood. When you came in with Peter Morgan,
you're slightly bitter, Andy. You can tell that.
No, not at all. You came in with Peter Morgan and Stephen Daldry, and quite an kind of impressive lineup. They're both Oscar winners or something. I don't know. They were certainly. You sort of thought this is something to take very seriously. There were issues about it being on a UK broadcast. I remember bringing this up and saying, how are you going to deal with things like the private lives of Prince Philip or whatever? The Queen and Prince Philip were both alive at the time, but it was easy to imagine a world in which they wouldn't both be alive by the time it went out or whatever. I was probably double sensitive about this because I'd had a bit of a problem with the BBC, with the Royle Family, when I left the BBC.
Indeed, you were hustled out by the Royle
Family. He was actually thrown out of the building.
I was shown the door.
I mean, I think making a comeback in podcasts, it's not a bad idea.
But I do remember that. I remember also the other thing I remember is saying to Peter Morgan, what are you looking for in a broadcaster partner? The sort of thing you say when you think the power's on the other side of the table. And he said, I'm looking for somebody who doesn't give me any notes at all.
Well, that's right. But firstly, Netflix was the final, the fifth meeting in a packed week. We went to HBO, Showtime, FX, all the usual people. Every single one of them turned it down in the room. Everyone was polite. Every boss, every person who led every of the major companies were in.
I didn't know that.
Because it was
why?
a
Did they
great
give a reason?
sprawling.
They just wanted a miniseries with Diana.
Okay.
At best.
Yes.
At best. Netflix loomed on the Friday. On the Thursday night, I mean, there's two things. Firstly, one, we knew that the Netflix was either that was it.
That's your Hail Mary.
And we didn't really
You
have
mean
it.
if they'd said no, you'd come back to me?
It would have been dead. We'd never have made it.
They would rather have not made it than made it for you. That's what he's saying.
I pushed hard to make sure that Ted Sarandos was in the room. I rang the studio boss of Sony, obviously, and said, look, we need him in the room. I think he'll be in the room, but I do want to double check. Will you make sure, please, he is in the room?
You're absolutely right. Get the person who can say yes in the room.
Always got to get the decision makers. And he bought it in the room, and Peter did, which was fantastic. Obviously, it was one of the great moments of my life. Because, we were pitching not just 6 series, we had to have a commitment for 2 series. That's 20 hours of television at a £5 million budget an hour, which at that time, that made
We
sense.
can all do the maths.
Yep.
Muzzle tough.
It's a lot of money. And they bought it.
Andy, I'm interested to know you were head of comedy and a head of drama, and I've heard this said before, that one of the problems here in the UK is that comedy and drama commissioners sit on different floors of the building and have not much to do with each other. And that's not the case if you go to a Hollywood studio. You don't come in and say, on the 3rd floor is the comedy department, on the 4th floor is the drama department. Would you change that?
Well, first of all, I think comedy writing and comedy shows and doing comedy, particularly scripted, I'm talking about scripted comedy, not talking. Is harder than drama, for sure. It's harder to get right. It's harder to make it. And with comedy, if it really works, it really, really works. But if it doesn't quite work, it can be quite awful. Whereas somehow drama, even when it's sort of okay,
it's still interesting.
It's still okay.
It's got production value. It's got good acting.
Nice lighting.
Comedy is more extreme, and I think it's much, much, much tougher. And I love doing comedy. I don't do as much as I used to do. It's a shame. I got into drama almost by default. I was running the Granada comedy department.
Well, you did the Royle Family, which was a groundbreaking sitcom, because it was a sitcom about people watching television.
And it was without an audience.
And it was without an audience.
Yes, without an audience.
Was there pressure on you to put an audience on it?
Oh my God, was there
So
pressure?
describe what the Royle Family was, because there may be people who weren't alive when you made it.
So the Royle Family, I mean, this was so the Royle Family was written by Craig Cash and Caroline Aherne and Henry, and it was a project that they developed while she was doing the Mrs. Merton show, basically. After 2 series of the Mrs. Merton show, I was involved in the negotiations with the BBC to get more Mrs. Merton. Caroline wanted to move on, really. She loved the Mrs. Merton show, but she didn't like performing live, and it just brought her, I think, a level of fame.
It was a talk show as well. It was she played a character.
She played the old lady. Yeah, the old lady. So so as part of the deal, I negotiated with Alan Yentob and Michael Jackson, still obviously running the BBC, a blind project which they had full access to develop as they wished. No, there was no title.
Sorry,
no
did they commit to a pilot or a series?
They committed to a pilot.
Wow.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so this was greeted with they were thrilled, and they went off, and it was. Occasionally I would say, "What's happening?" Nothing. They wouldn't tell me a word. And then literally one day I was summoned. They used to write in I had an office, half a floor in Granada, in Manchester, and they used to write in an office, literally sort of 5 yards away from me. And I had to knock before I went in and all that kind of stuff. But they were brilliant. But anyway, one day I got a message from Craig. I was to come at 5 o'clock, and they had a present for me. So I said, fine, okay. And I went in and I was handed the Royle Family script. And, Caroline made this little speech saying, I know, Andy, I think it's a bit short. She said, I know it's only 24 pages, but it's got pauses in it, Andy. It's going to be much slower. And I said, okay, fine. And they used to put gags in their script so to see how far I got, because I had a bit of a reputation for reading the first few pages saying, yeah, it's fine, that's good. Attention to detail is not my, yeah. Anyway, I'm a big picture guy.
You're a big picture guy. Yeah. You're a vision guy.
Anyway, I think I did read it all the way through, and I did pick up a couple of references towards the back end where are you still reading, Andy, and things like that. And I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I did think it was fantastic. She wanted everything rooted properly, and that life was essentially funny, and that's what she wanted to make. And it was very clear. And this was this was so a naturalistic performance required absolutely to film it like a film and with a single camera.
It was a single camera. You didn't have multi-camera on it.
No, well,
and in those days, that was unusual for a comedy not to have an audience.
There wasn't any.
Whereas now it's the opposite. It's more unusual to have an audience.
There weren't any, and I don't think that. I don't take anything away from Ricky and what he achieved for The Office, but I think Ricky would admit that the Royle Family paved the way.
Yeah,
and they took it on, and it was for a brilliant show. But the Royle Family broke ground, and yes, no, the BBC didn't get it. I must be honest with you. The Head of Comedy was totally opposed to it not being done.
They didn't get it when they'd seen a pilot, not just on the page or on the screen.
They insisted on having initially a read through with a little audience in Manchester, which they came
before you'd made the pilot.
Yes,
yeah, okay.
So we did a read through in Manchester. I mean, I thought it went well, but they were unconvinced that it didn't. They wanted a performance. They wanted a performance piece with a live audience. I just said it wasn't that piece. There was a brief, there was an odd bit in between where Caroline was very keen for the director of the live Mrs. Merton show to do the show.
Yeah.
To do the pilot. She was a studio director, so Caroline wanted, therefore, to put the set in the Granada studio and film it multi-camera. And I said, it won't work. It's not what you need. I'm really against this. But in the end, she was very persuasive, Caroline. Very persuasive. I mean, that was one of the things. One of the things that people never understood about Caroline is right from almost the first meeting I ever had with her with the Mrs. Merton on the Mrs. Merton show. She said, I want to be in the edit. I want to make the final decisions on the comedy. And we are, Jeff Pope and I, are developing a feature script about Caroline, actually.
About her life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jeff has written...
you'll be in it, then?
I'm in it, yeah. No,
what actor?
Who's going to play you?
Find somebody?
Well, that's the problem. I mean...
Bradley Walsh?
It's like the older Bradley Walsh, I think.
Jimmy is not going to be the casting director, that's for sure. But Jeff has written a line for her to me to say, she says something. The joke is, Andy, you may know where the best restaurants are in London, and that's all very well if we're going out for a meal, but I know where the jokes are and you don't, and that was Caroline, and I love that about her. I really did. I loved and it was great to empower her, to be able to empower her. Yeah. No, I don't mean that in a sort of patriarchal way. I mean, right, okay, she is an extraordinary set of talent. I mean, I'm talking about her and Craig and the team. This is what I can get this made. I can get it made in the way they want to get it made. And I knew and understood completely, because of my interest in film anyway, how it would look. The pilot in the studio, I stopped after half an hour because we recorded the first 10 minutes. It was lunch. I called them upstairs. We played the tape back, and I said, it doesn't look like that. What do you think? I didn't say that.
Was this with an audience or without?
No, without an audience, but
multi-camera.
It was a multi-camera, but without an audience.
So it just looked like a multi-camera.
So it looked thin.
It was thin, and it was completely... This was a total compromise, of course. It was what the BBC were interested in. Anyway, I don't know if the tape even exists. We stopped it. I think we did actually finish recording just for the sake of it. And then we went. I managed to persuade the BBC to put more money up, and we went and shot it at a very leaky, rather wonderful, probably gone studio in Stockport, where you could hear the rain.
Lighting it properly like a single camera shoot.
And it did look real. It looked like a real family on a real sofa watching telly.
Yes, and we brought in a rather good director called Mark Mylod. If I mentioned Succession and just a few other things, maybe he's the lead director of Harry Potter. He's done all right, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you, Mark did a fantastic job. He completely understood it too, and he was a young director. It wasn't a break for him because he was already doing really good work, but I was thrilled to get him.
That story you've just told, could that happen today? Would the system allow it to happen today?
It's a good question. I think it might. I think it could do.
I'm always interested when something gets away on, like, Baby Reindeer.
Well, see, that's very interesting.
And when that gets away, you think, wow, that's a very unusual...
I think a very bold commission.
It was a stage show.
Have you talked about that before, Baby Reindeer?
No, not really.
I think it's a very interesting example. My understanding of the Baby Reindeer story, obviously, he was a very clever comedian and had been developing shows at the Edinburgh Festival, and that particular one, which was picked up and bought by Lindsay Salt, who was then now head of drama at BBC, but then one of the commissioning team of Netflix.
Yeah.
And I think she's got very good taste, Lindsay. She used to work with me. And
Are you pitching her a show next week?
She's coming to the set of Dear England on Friday, actually.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to seeing her then. I don't know when this is going
This goes out on Friday.
You're actually making Dear England?
We are making Dear England right now.
You finally got the money?
finally got the money. It was very difficult.
This goes out on Friday, so if you want to, some carefully chosen words to welcome her to the set, now's your moment. She's a visionary,
Gosh,
did you say? She's brilliant.
She is all of that. But anyway, to finish on
nice
Baby Reindeer,
person.
it was very much, my understanding was very much her passion. I mean, obviously shared by Clerkenwell.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think he chose Clerkenwell, or maybe he was steered towards Clerkenwell. I don't know.
Well, I think he chose Clark because I went to see
Well, it's
it.
a good choice. They're a very good
I went
company.
to see it in Shepherd's Bush,
Right.
and afterwards I met him for a drink,
Ah.
and I said, "I'd like to option this,"
Yeah.
and he said, "I'm really sorry, I've already done a deal with a production company, so I missed the boat."
Well, I didn't even see it, so I was literally not even in the harbour. So, well done,
No,
you two.
I saw the
I
show
don't know. I
because someone
felt very bad
recommended it
about
to me.
I don't know why I didn't see it, but anyway, look, it was. And I know that it was a 3
But it's
year.
counterintuitive to think that's going to, and it was put up for best comedy,
Kind of
wasn't it?
Yes, but I think
And had a huge. It was Netflix most watched show
Yeah, but I
globally.
think Netflix didn't entirely. I mean, I'm not to speak out of the turn here, but I don't think as the show was being produced and then finally completed, I don't think they really knew what they had or knew how to
Had
promote
Lindsay
it.
Sort gone by then?
Yes.
She was at the BBC.
Yes.
So that's always dangerous for
It
show.
was difficult.
The person who commissioned it
the
and had great
champion.
enthusiasm's gone.
But I think it's an interesting example of a really good idea, which becomes a great show, slipping through the system and then becoming a fucking great hit.
Let me ask you this question: when you say about risks and taking risks, what's the most riskiest thing you've done?
Well, I take lots of risks. I mean, I like taking risks. I enjoy it, and they don't always pay off. But I suppose one of the most possibly naughtiest and most outrageous things I did was when I sold Strike Back to Sky, which was the action series that ran for 8 series.
Yeah, it's hugely successful.
And actually, I'm developing it as a movie right now. But it all came about because I bought a book by.
Well, you bought the option to the book.
No. I just bought the
You
book.
bought what, $8.99 at the airport?
What you?
Did you read it?
No, I didn't read it. I just put it in my bag. I went to Austria. I was going to see Peter Morgan to discuss a project with Peter Morgan, and the plane was delayed. I went into the bookshop, which is a bit of a habit of mine, and you just let your eyes scan over and see what happened. And the Strike Back book was all piled up. Action show.
But you're dyslexic, aren't you?
I am a bit dyslexic, yes,
Yeah.
but I can read if it's a headline. I can
Okay,
read
fine.
Detail
Anyway,
then.
it said something like, jihadis.
It says something like screaming to be made into a major television
It's
series. by
exactly jihadis
left bank.
capture
Good title.
Sky TV reporter. Great title. So I bought it, put it in the rucksack, went to see Peter, came back, forgot all about it, and 2 weeks later I had this meeting with the head of drama at Sky. And I was standing in the shower that morning thinking, oh Christ, what am I going to say to her? Well, it doesn't matter. We'll just have a coffee and a bit of a gossip. She was very nice. And but when I went in, we gossiped for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then she suddenly said, I've got money, it's got to be a book. I went, I've got the book. I actually had the book with me. Because I remembered to take it with me so I could wave it around.
Had you thumbed the...
Well, no.
Had you
And
broken the
she said,
spine to give the impression you'd read it at least?
She said, pitch it to me. I said, you don't. I said, it's so simple, it's not worth the pitch.
Pitches itself.
It pitches itself. Strike Back. I said, that's basically it.
It's struck and it's back and it's great.
And she literally disappeared and came back with an order for 10 shows.
Yeah, but your problem is now you don't know the rights.
So then I rushed out of the building and I called our business affairs, Charlie. Despairs of me. I said, Charlie, whatever you're doing, stop, drop it. You call the publisher of Strike Back, and buy that book as soon as possible, and don't take no for an answer. Whatever. We just got a commission for 10 shows.
Wow.
Brilliant. So listen, just one last question. Are we getting any more Department Q?
Yes, Department Q has been recommissioned, which is really good.
Brilliant.
And
Scott-
there's more
Scott
city
Frank-
as ours as well.
More City, yeah, that has also been recommissioned.
Crown,
And-
are you going to go back to the beginning?
And there is a
Start with
possibility
King
that
William
you,
and Conqueror?
you never know.
So you'll just keep going
Oh
back
no, they've just done
to...
that, haven't they?
You just keep going back and back and back. will
Well,
you?
you've got to create. Once you create your own IP, you want to just keep.
Well, the Crown goes back thousands of years.
Yes, there's plenty of material, isn't there?
All right.
Yeah,
Well, listen,
yeah,
Andy,
yeah.
it's been a real pleasure.
It has been. Thank you
And
very much for asking.
we
me.
were virgins. We never interviewed with someone before.
Well, I
You
hope
made
you
it
can
very
make
easy for us.
something else. It's good to take all the plugs out for Peter's shows.
Oh, it's impossible.
Don't worry, there is
It's
an
impossible.
edit to do.
It's an embedded corporate
Well,
show.
we're all indies, we've got to bang the drum.
We're
haven't we?
always selling.
That's all. all for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to Andy for being with us. Any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask, send them our way. We'd love to hear from you.
You can send us an email, or you can get in touch on
Frank's
our socials.
outside, and I can see he's getting very...
Fair enough. Our studio's about to be taken over by Frank Skinner.
Yes, Frank Skinner's banging on the door. You can send us emails, and please, if you've enjoyed the show, do follow Insiders, the TV podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, or even better, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? Thank you again, Andy.
Thank you.